40 years, that's how long it takes to build something worth losing. My name is Anthony Gary. For 38 of my 61 years, I ran Gary Precision Manufacturing on Mosteller Road in Sharonville, Ohio. A machine parts company. I started with a $12,000 loan from a credit union that no longer exists, a second-hand CNC lathe, and the specific stubbornness of a man who had grown up watching his father work for other people and had decided at 23 that he would not do the same. We made precision components, aerospace subcontracts, medical device housings, automotive tolerances tight enough that the engineers who spec'd them came to visit just to watch us hold them. At our peak, we had 41 employees, 3 shifts, and a reputation in the Midwest manufacturing corridor that I was quietly proud of every single morning when I drove through those doors. I say was because on Monday, March 10th, at approximately 10:45 in the morning, the bank called and the company died. Not dramatically, not with an explosion or a flood, or any of the cinematic catastrophes that make for good explaining at dinner parties. It died the way most things die in American business, quietly, by paperwork, by the compounding weight of a perfect storm I had been watching build for 18 months and had not moved fast enough to escape. The storm had a name: Ray Sutter. Ray had been my business partner for 11 years. 11 years of shared decisions, shared risk, shared profit. What I did not know, what I did not find out until 14 months ago, when our auditor Philip Crane called me into his office with the expression of a man delivering a terminal diagnosis, was that Ray had been siphoning operating capital into a separate LLC for 4 years. Not dramatically, not millions at a time. Carefully, methodically, the way a slow leak drains a tank. Nothing alarming on any single day. Catastrophic in aggregate. By the time I understood the scope of what Ray had done, we were already in trouble. I spent 14 months trying to save it. Bridge financing, contract renegotiation, personal guarantees that I now understand with the clarity of hindsight were the financial equivalent of bailing the Titanic with a coffee mug. On Monday, March 10th, the bank called the loans. On Tuesday, March 11th, the keys to Gary Precision Manufacturing were surrendered. 41 people who had worked for me, some of them for 20 years, were notified by a woman from the bank's asset recovery team who had never once set foot on our production floor. On Wednesday, March 12th, I received notice that the house in Anderson Township, the house where I raised Russell, the house where Carol died in the bedroom we'd shared for 29 years, the house I had refinanced twice to keep the company alive, was being included in the secured creditor recovery process. I had 72 hours to remove my personal belongings. Wednesday evening, March 12th, 7:15 p.m., I packed what fit in my car, which, when you're doing it for real and not in a movie montage, is less than you'd think and more than you can look at without your chest doing something complicated. Carol's photographs, my father's watch, the service records from the company's first 10 years that I've kept in a manila folder since 1989 for no reason I can articulate except that they represent the time when everything was still possible. Russell's number was in my phone. I called it at 7:43. He picked up on the third ring. Dad. Hey, how are you? I heard about the company. Becca saw something online. Yeah. I was sitting in Carol's chair, former my house, with my coat on. It's done. The house too. I've got until Friday to be out. A pause. The pause of a man recalibrating. Dad. That's okay. That's a lot. What are you thinking right now? I'm thinking I need somewhere to stay for a few days while I figure out next steps. Maybe a week. I don't need much. The couch is fine. I just need... Hold on. The hold lasted 4 minutes. I know because I looked at the clock on the wall. The kitchen clock Carol bought in 1994 at a craft fair in Loveland. The one with the slightly wrong hour hand that we never got around to replacing. I looked at it for 4 minutes in what was still technically my house. Russell came back. Dad. Something in his voice had shifted. The specific shift of a man who has had a conversation with someone else in the intervening 4 minutes and is now delivering a result rather than having a discussion. Becca isn't. She's not comfortable with. She says the timing isn't great and we've got some things going on at the house. And she doesn't think it's a good idea right now for... Russell. I know, I'm sorry. It's not my call alone. Russell. Calm. Even. 61 years of practice keeping my voice steady when I needed it steady. I understand. Dad, I understand. I said again. I'll figure it out. I'll let you know where I land. I hung up. Sat in Carol's chair for another few minutes. This is where you tell me something, Carol. This is where you say the thing you always said when things got bad. That the bottom is just the place you start building from. Tell me that. The kitchen clock ticked, the hour hand slightly wrong. Like always, I picked up my keys and walked out of my house for the last time. The Kroger parking lot on Cooper Road in Blue Ash is open 24 hours. I know this now with the specific intimacy of a man who spent a night in it. I parked in the far corner, away from the entrance lights, in the shadow between two lot lamps where a silver Buick LeSabre containing a 61-year-old former business owner is not immediately obvious to anyone doing a casual scan of the lot. I did not sleep well. This is the polite version. What actually happened is that I sat in the driver's seat with the heat running in 20-minute intervals to preserve gas, watching the Kroger lot cycle through its late-night population. The overnight shelf-stockers arriving at 11, the insomniacs running for milk at 2 a.m., a police cruiser that did 2 slow loops without stopping, a teenager who sat in his car for 40 minutes apparently doing nothing before driving away. This is where you are, Anthony. 61 years old. This is the parking lot where you ended up. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. I'd expected anger. At Ray Sutter, at the bank, at Russell, at Becca, at the general machinery of a world that can take 40 years of work and disassemble it in 72 hours. But what I felt instead, sitting in that parking lot in the blue ash dark, was something flatter, something that didn't have a clean name. The specific interior weather of a man who has been moving forward under his own momentum for so long that the sudden absence of anything to move toward has left him briefly unable to locate himself. Carol would have known what to say. Carol always knew what to say. She'd been gone 4 years. Pancreatic. Fast, which the doctors seemed to think was a mercy, and which I have never been able to fully agree with. I fell asleep somewhere around 4 a.m. with my coat over me like a blanket, and the seat slightly reclined and the parking lot lights doing their orange thing through my eyelids. My phone rang at 7:53 a.m. Thursday, March 13th. The screen said unknown number. I almost didn't answer. My thumb was on the decline button when something, instinct, desperation, the vague hope that any change in the morning's trajectory was worth investigating, made me swipe right. Mr. Anthony Gary? The specific enunciation of a man who has been trained to speak carefully and has been doing it for decades. Not robotic, warm actually, but controlled in a way that suggested the warmth was professional rather than spontaneous. Speaking. My name is Edmund Price. I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Walter Hess. I sat up straighter in my reclined Buick seat, which took more physical effort than it should have. Walter Hess. I knew the name. Everyone in Cincinnati manufacturing knew the name. Walter Hess, founder of Hess Industrial Group, a Cincinnati institution that had been operating since 1971, the kind of company that had its name on a building at the University of Cincinnati Business School. I had never met Walter Hess. I had never had reason to. Yes, sir. Mr. Hess has asked me to reach you this morning. He would very much like to see you today, if possible. This afternoon. I looked out my windshield at the Kroger parking lot. A woman was returning a cart. A man in a puffy coat was loading groceries into a minivan. The morning was gray and cold and entirely ordinary. Mr. Price, I said carefully, can I ask why Walter Hess wants to see me? A pause. Not evasive. Exactly. More like a man honoring a specific instruction about how much to say on the phone. Mr. Hess said to tell you it concerns his estate. He has a matter he wishes to discuss with you personally before certain documents are finalized. Another pause. He was quite specific, Mr. Gary, that it be you. He asked me to find you this morning. The Kroger parking lot. The orange lights still going in the pale March morning. A man who had lost everything in 72 hours sitting in his car, being found. I didn't know yet what Walter Hess knew about me. I didn't know yet how long he'd been watching. I didn't know yet that the worst 3 days of my life had been the exact condition required to bring me to this phone call. What time? I asked. 2 o'clock, Mr. Gary. I'll text you the address. I'll be there. I hung up, sat for a moment, then I started the car and drove to a gas station on Cornell Road, used the restroom to wash my face and change my shirt from the bag in my back seat, bought a coffee and a breakfast sandwich, and sat in the gas station lot eating it with the specific focused attention of a man who has decided that today requires him to be present. Something is happening, I thought. Something I don't understand yet. But something. That was enough. For right now, that was enough. Welcome back to Sweet Family Revenge. Grab your snacks, get comfortable, and remember, the people in these stories had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment below and make sure you subscribe. You're going to want to be here when this thing unfolds. I called Pete Garland at 9 a.m. Pete has been my closest friend since we worked the same factory floor in our 20s. Before I started Gary Precision, and before Pete became a union rep, and then a labor consultant, and then retired to a house in Hyde Park where he grows tomatoes and reads history books and is available at any reasonable hour to tell you the truth about yourself. Anthony. He answered on the first ring. Pete always answers on the first ring. I heard about the company. I've been waiting for you to call. I know. I'm sorry it took. It's been a week. Where are you? Gas station on Cornell. Slept in the Kroger lot last night. The silence that followed was brief and complete, and contained, I suspected, several things Pete chose not to say. Come here, he said. Right now, I'll make eggs. I can't yet. I have something this afternoon I need to tell you about. I told him about Edmund Price's call, about Walter Hess, about the estate and the documents, and the 2 p.m. at an address I hadn't received yet. Pete was quiet for a moment after I finished. Walter Hess, he said. Anthony, Walter Hess is dying. It's been in the Business Courier for 2 months. Pancreatic, I think. That landed somewhere specific. Pancreatic. The same thing that took Carol. You know anything about him personally? I asked. Not the company. Him. Some, Pete said. He's old Cincinnati. Built Hess Industrial from nothing. Tool and die originally. Branched into broader industrial supply. Self-made, like you. No kids. Wife died about 12 years ago. A pause. Anthony, why does Walter Hess know your name? The Indian Hill neighborhood of Cincinnati sits on the eastern edge of Hamilton County like a place that decided, sometime around 1940, that it had enough of the world's noise and simply withdrew behind its trees and its winding roads and its very deliberate quiet. Estates out there don't announce themselves. No gates with names on them. No fountains visible from the road. Just long driveways disappearing into property so well maintained it looks like nature that has been politely asked to perform. I had driven past Indian Hill 100 times over 61 years. I had never had reason to turn in. Until Thursday, March 13th at 1:57 p.m., when Edmund Price's texted address led me down a gravel-bordered lane off Spooky Hollow Road and through a pair of open iron gates to a house that I will describe simply as the kind of house that reminds you, without any malice, of the distance between where you started and where some people landed. Thursday, March 13th, 1:57 p.m. The driveway was a quarter-mile long. Red brick with the particular aged quality of a surface that has been maintained rather than replaced. The bricks worn smooth in the tire tracks, bordered by hedges that were bare in the March cold, but clearly enormous in summer. The house at the end was Georgian. 3 stories, limestone exterior, symmetrical windows, the kind of architecture that doesn't try to impress you because it doesn't need to. I parked my Buick, my car that had been my bed 12 hours earlier, in a small designated area near the front, and sat for exactly 30 seconds reminding myself of certain facts. You are Anthony Gary. You built a company from nothing. You employed 41 people. You held tolerances that aerospace engineers flew to Ohio to watch you hold. You slept in a parking lot last night, but that is a detail about your circumstances and not about who you are. Remember the difference. I got out of the car. Edmund Price answered the door before I reached it. He was 60 or thereabouts. Compact, upright, with close-cropped silver hair and the kind of face that is permanently composed without being cold. He wore a dark suit with a white shirt, no tie, and he extended his hand with the directness of someone who has been waiting without impatience. Mr. Gary, Edmund Price, thank you for coming on such short notice. Thank you for calling. I shook his hand. Is Mr. Hess? Can you tell me anything before I go in? Edmund's expression moved slightly, something that, on a less controlled face, might have been called sympathy. Mr. Hess is alert and comfortable. he said. He has good hours and difficult ones. This afternoon has been good. He's been looking forward to this. A pause. He asked me to tell you, before you went in, that this conversation is entirely voluntary on your part. If at any point you want to leave, you leave. He was very specific about that. All right, I said. Edmund led me through the house. I registered it in pieces. A hallway with dark wood floors and landscape paintings. A sitting room off to the left with enough afternoon light to make it feel lived in rather than preserved. A library whose shelves went to the ceiling and had one of those rolling ladders that I had previously seen only in movies. The house smelled like old wood and something slightly medicinal. And, underneath both of those, something that reminded me unexpectedly of my father's house. The smell of a life that had accumulated slowly over many decades in one place. We went up a wide staircase to the second floor. Down a hallway, Edmund knocked twice on a door at the end, opened it, and stepped aside. Mr. Hess. Mr. Gary is here. Walter Hess was propped up in a chair by the window rather than in bed, which told me something about the man before he said a word. Dying men who choose the chair over the bed are telling you something about how they intend to conduct their remaining days. Upright, present, engaged. He was 79, thin in the way serious illness makes people thin, but with a physical framework that you could see had once been substantial. Broad shoulders still, even under the weight they'd lost. White hair. Dark eyes that were sharp in a way that the rest of him, clearly, was not. On his right, a small table with a water glass and several medications. On his left, a leather portfolio and what appeared to be a legal document folder. He looked at me when I entered and his face did something deliberate, an assessment, careful and unhurried, the way experienced men look at other men when they're deciding something important. Anthony Gary, he said. His voice was quieter than I expected, but clear. Sit down, please. There was a chair positioned across from him. Not hospital room positioned, not the arrangement of a man receiving a visitor in bed. It was positioned the way chairs are positioned for a conversation between equals. I sat. You don't know me, Walter Hess said. No, sir. But I know you. I've known your work for about 16 years. He shifted slightly in the chair, a careful movement, the kind that manages pain without advertising it. Gary Precision, Mosteller Road. You held a micron tolerance on a titanium housing in 2009 that 3 other shops in Ohio told the customer was impossible. I looked at him. That was us. Aerospace subcontractor. I was a minor investor in the prime contractor. A slight pause. When they told me which shop held the tolerance, I looked you up. I've been watching your company since then. The March light came through the window between us. The Indian Hill quiet outside. No traffic. No machinery. Nothing except the occasional sound of wind in the bare trees. Why? I asked. Walter Hess looked at me with those sharp, dark eyes for a long moment. Because I recognized something in how you ran that place, he said. I've been in manufacturing my whole life. I know the difference between a man who builds a company and a man who operates one. You built yours. The same way I built mine. From nothing, with your hands, on credit you couldn't entirely afford, employing people who depended on you personally. He paused. I don't meet many men like that anymore. The ones who are still doing it the old way. I didn't say anything. I couldn't quite locate a response. I know what happened with your partner, Walter said. His voice was direct but not unkind. Ray Sutter. I had my own difficulties with a partner once. 1978. Different scale, same mechanics. A man you trusted with your numbers deciding your numbers were really his numbers. He looked at the window briefly. I survived mine because I had a line of credit and a customer who advanced me work. You didn't have either of those when it mattered. That's not failure of character. That's failure of timing. Something in my chest that had been compressed since Monday morning moved slightly. Just slightly. Like a door shifting in a frame. Mr. Hess. I kept my voice level. What is this conversation about? He reached to his left and opened the leather portfolio. Slowly, deliberately, with the careful economy of movement of a man who has learned to spend his physical energy wisely. I have no children, he said. My wife Ruth died 12 years ago. My estate has been in planning for several years. I'm not a man who leaves these things to the last minute. He laid a hand flat on the folder. I have a substantial charitable foundation that will continue to operate, Several longtime employees are provided for, and there is a significant portion of the Hess Industrial Group, a controlling interest, 41%, that I have been deciding what to do with for about 18 months. He looked at me directly. I want to give it to you. The Indian hill quiet, the March window light, the sound of my own breathing. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I sat in that chair and looked at a dying man in a chair across from me, and tried to locate the part of this that was the catch, the condition, the thing that made it make sense in the way things usually make sense, because the alternative, that this was simply and purely what it appeared to be, was more than I knew how to hold in one sitting. Mr. Hess, I said finally. My voice was steady. I am honestly not sure how. I need you to explain that to me more fully. He almost smiled. Not quite. The pain wouldn't quite let it, but the corners of his eyes moved in a way that was close. Edmund, he said without raising his voice. Edmund Price materialized in the doorway as if he had been standing just outside it, which he had. Ask Conrad to come up. Conrad Marsh arrived in 3 minutes from somewhere in the house. A tall man in his mid-60s, with the organized efficiency of a senior attorney who has handled significant estates for long enough that the figures no longer register on his face. He shook my hand, sat in a third chair that Edmund positioned precisely, and opened his own folder. Mr. Gary? Conrad said. Mr. Hess has asked me to walk you through the structure he's proposing, answer your questions as completely as I can, and give you whatever time you need to consult your own counsel before any decisions are made. All right. The Hess Industrial Group is currently held 60% by Mr. Hess, personally 40% by a longtime business associate who retired 5 years ago and whose interest has already been addressed separately. He turned a page. The 60% Mr. Hess controls. He's proposing to transfer 41% to you as an operating interest, with 19% going to the charitable foundation as a permanent non-operating stake. The foundation won't interfere in operations. It simply holds an interest whose dividends fund the foundation's work. I looked at Walter Hess. Why 41? Majority, he said simply. 41 beats 39. You'd have operational control. I don't want to give you something and then leave you in a position where someone else can override you. The precision of that. The same precision that goes into a tight tolerance. The thinking of a man who builds things and knows that the details in the design are where things either hold or fail. What's the condition? I asked. Because there was one. There had to be one. One, Walter said. You keep the people. I waited. Hess Industrial has 217 employees. Most of them have been there more than 10 years. Some of them more than 20. He shifted in the chair again. The careful movement. I'm not going to be here to take care of them. I need someone who will. Not because it's legally required. Conrad will tell you the transfer carries no binding employment obligations, but because it's right. He met my eyes. You had 41 people at Gary Precision. I know you spent 14 months trying to save their jobs before you finally couldn't. That tells me what I need to know. The room was very quiet. I sat in that room for 2.5 hours. Conrad walked me through every element of the proposed transfer. The structure, the timeline, the valuation. The transition plan Walter had already outlined with a specificity that told me he'd been working on this for months, not days. I asked questions, real ones, detailed ones, the questions of a man who has read enough contracts to know where the problems hide. Walter Hess answered every one of them. Sometimes Conrad answered. Sometimes Edmund brought water. Twice Walter's physician, Dr. Yvonne Slade, looked in from the doorway, assessed him with professional efficiency, and withdrew. At 4:30, Walter looked more tired than he had at 2. Not depleted, just honest about his limits. You don't have to decide anything today, he said. I need another week or so before the documents are ready to sign. Take the time. Get your own attorney. Ask me anything else you need to ask. Why me? I asked. Not the company reasons. Not the tolerance in 2009, or the 16 years of watching from a distance. There are other people you could have given this to. People with more runway, more capital, more, Walter said. Yes, there are. He looked at me with those sharp, dark eyes, tired now, but still completely present. But more has a habit of making people forget what it felt like to have nothing. And I need someone running this company who hasn't forgotten that. A pause. You slept in a parking lot last night, Anthony. I went still. Edmund confirmed your location before he called you this morning. Walter said. Not with pity, with the directness of a man who doesn't have time left for anything else. I'm not telling you that to embarrass you. I'm telling you because that parking lot is the reason I'm certain. A man who's still here, still answering his phone, still sitting up straight in a chair in my house after a week like you've had. That's the man I want. I stood up, shook Walter Hess's hand, gently, because he offered it gently, but firmly because he returned the firmness. I'll be in touch by Monday, I said. I'll be here, Walter said. And then, quietly, with the dry understatement of a man who had built everything he had from nothing and knew exactly how much time he had left. For a little while longer, anyway. If you've made it this far, do us one quick favor. Subscribe. A lot of people watch without ever doing it, and it costs you nothing but means everything to us. Thank you, genuinely. Now let's see how this ends. I called Pete from the car at the end of the Indian Hill driveway. He picked up on the first ring. Well, Pete, my voice was, I noticed this abstractly, the way you notice things about yourself when you're operating at an unusual altitude. Not steady in the usual way. Steady ear. I need to come to Hyde Park and I need you to make something stronger than coffee, and I need to tell you about the last 2.5 hours. A pause. Anthony. Pete's voice had something in it I hadn't heard from him in a long time. Something like the edge of emotion that Pete Garland, who is not a demonstrative man, keeps well managed at all times. Are you okay? Yeah, I said. Looked out through the Buick's windshield at the Indian Hill lane ahead of me, at the late afternoon March light filtering through the bare trees, at the road that was going to take me somewhere different than where I'd been yesterday. Yeah, Pete, I think I'm okay. I think I'm okay. I didn't know it yet, but Russell had tried to call me twice while I was in Walter's house. I didn't know yet what he'd found out, or who'd told him, or what Becca had said when he came home with the news. I didn't know yet that the parking lot on Cooper Road had been observed by more than the overnight police cruiser, and I didn't know yet that the most important thing Walter Hess had told me that afternoon wasn't about the company at all. I put the car in drive and headed for Hyde Park. Pete Garland's kitchen in Hyde Park smells like coffee and old newspapers, and the specific accumulated warmth of a house where someone has been comfortable for a long time. I have been sitting in Pete's kitchen at various stages of crisis and celebration for 30 years, and the kitchen has always smelled the same, and that consistency is something I value more than I've ever told him. Thursday evening, March 13th, I sat across from Pete at his kitchen table and told him everything. The parking lot, Edmund Price's call, the driveway, the Georgian house, the leather portfolio, Walter Hess in the chair by the window, Conrad Marsh, and the 41%, the 217 employees. Keep the people. Pete listened the way Pete listens. Completely still, completely quiet. His coffee going cold in front of him because he forgot it was there. When I finished, he was quiet for another full minute. Then he said, "He confirmed your location before he called you." That's what he said. "Edmund went and found your car in the Kroger lot." That's what it sounded like. Pete picked up his cold coffee, set it back down without drinking it. "Anthony, he wasn't testing you. He already knew. He said the parking lot was the reason he was certain." "I know. He'd already decided before Edmund made that call." "I know. Pete." He looked at me across the table. 63 years old, Pete Garland, with the face of a man who has watched the world operate for long enough to recognize something real when it arrives in his kitchen. "You need an attorney by Monday," he said. "I know that, too. I know someone. Sandra Fike. Corporate and estate, she's been practicing in Cincinnati for 25 years. She's thorough and she's fast, and she will not be impressed by Conrad Marsh's letterhead, which is what you need. Call her tonight?" "Tonight," Pete confirmed. He stood up, walked to the phone on the wall. Pete Garland still has a wall phone in his kitchen, which is one of his finest qualities, and dialed Sandra Fike's number from memory. I slept in Pete's guest room that night, on an actual bed, under an actual blanket, and I slept the way I hadn't slept since before the bank called, deeply, completely, without the parking lot lights and the 20-minute heat intervals. I slept the way a man sleeps when something has shifted and the floor has come back under him, and he can let his weight down again. Friday, March 14th. Sandra Fike met me at 9 a.m. at her office on Sycamore Street downtown. She was 55, precise. With reading glasses she took off and put on in rapid rotation as she went through Conrad's preliminary documents, which Edmund had emailed over at Walter's instruction Thursday evening. She read everything twice, made notes in the margin with a red pen. Then she took off her glasses, set them on the desk, and looked at me. "This is clean," she said. "Unusually clean. Marsh has been thorough. There aren't the usual gaps you see in this kind of transfer when someone is rushing. The foundation stake is fully not operating. The 41% is unrestricted in terms of your management decisions. There are no clawback provisions, no performance conditions, no buyback options." She tapped the stack of papers. "The only thing in here that functions as a condition is the letter of intent regarding employment continuity, and even that is structured as an expression of intent rather than a binding covenant. Legally, you could let people go after the transfer and nothing in this document prevents it. I'm not going to do that." She looked at me. "I know. I'm telling you what the document says, not what I think you'll do." A pause. "Mr. Hess has been very careful not to trap you with conditions. He's transferring this to you on the basis of judgment, not legal constraint. He's betting on who you are." I thought about Walter in the chair by the window. The precision of the 41%, majority. You'd have operational control. "What do you need from me to be ready to sign by end of week?" I asked. "2 things. A personal financial statement, current, which given your circumstances will be brief, but that's fine. And a signed letter of intent, acknowledging the employment continuity understanding, not legally binding, but it goes in the file. I'll have both by tomorrow afternoon." She picked up her pen. "Mr. Gary, I want to be clear. I've reviewed a lot of transactions in 25 years. This one is unusual. Not the mechanics. The intention." She looked at me directly. "Walter Hess is giving you a company worth considerably more than anything you've lost. He's doing it with almost no conditions and a 1-week timeline. That tells me he's been planning this for a long time and that you were specifically chosen." A pause. "Whatever you did to earn that, keep doing it." Russell called Friday afternoon at 2:15. I was in Pete's guest room drafting the financial statement on Pete's kitchen table, borrowing his printer, his paper, the reading glasses Pete wears and always denies wearing, when my phone buzzed. Russell Gary. I looked at the screen for a moment, then I answered. "Dad." His voice was different from Wednesday night. The managed quality was gone. What was there instead was something rawer, something that reminded me of his voice at 14, before he learned to manage things. "Dad, I need to. I heard something. Donna Fielding called Becca this morning. She saw you in the Kroger lot on Cooper Road. She saw your car. She recognized the Buick. Donna Fielding, the neighbor 3 houses down from Russell in Blue Ash. Of course. She said you were there all night. She saw you when she went for her morning run." "Okay," I said. "Dad." His voice broke on the word just slightly, just enough. "You slept in the parking lot. You were 3 miles from our house, and you slept in the parking lot because..." "Russell." "Because I didn't. Because Becca said I should have." Russell, firm. Not angry, not performing patience. Actually calm, actually steady the way I'd been trying to teach him to be since he was a boy. "Take a breath." A pause. The sound of him doing it. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm really sorry." I sat with that. The guest room at Pete's house. The Cincinnati Friday afternoon. The financial statement on the table in front of me that was, by any conventional measure, the most depressing document I'd ever produced, and which I was assembling for a purpose that 3 days ago I could not have imagined. You could do a lot of things with this moment, I thought. You could make him feel it. You could let him sit in it. You could put the parking lot in his chest and make sure he carries it. "I know you are," I said. "I know. Can I? What are you?" "I'm okay, Russell. I'm somewhere good. I have some things developing that I'll tell you about when there's more to tell." A pause. "Is Becca? She feels terrible," he said, and from his voice I believed it was true. "She told me this morning she should have. She didn't realize how. Tell her I appreciate that." I meant it. Resentment is a luxury, and I've never been able to afford luxuries for long. When this settles, I'll have you both to dinner. I'll cook. Dad. I have to go, Russell. I have some paperwork to finish. I'll call you next week. I hung up, sat for a moment, looked at the financial statement. Carol, I thought. Are you watching this? Whatever is happening right now, are you watching? The Hyde Park afternoon was quiet outside Pete's window. Somewhere in the distance, a dog was barking, and then it wasn't, and the quiet came back. I think you'd have something to say about all of this, I thought. I think you'd tell me the bottom is just the place you start building from, and I think you'd be right, like always. I picked up the pen and finished the financial statement. Friday evening, Pete made dinner, pasta, decent red wine, the kind of meal that doesn't try to be anything except what it is, and lands exactly right. We ate in his kitchen and talked about things that weren't the company, and weren't Walter Hess, and weren't Russell, and weren't any of the things that had occupied the week. We talked about the Reds' spring training prospects, which were modest but present. We talked about Pete's tomato garden and when he was going to start the seedlings. We talked about my father, who had worked a factory floor his whole life and who I had been thinking about intermittently all week, and the way you think about people whose choices shaped yours. He'd have liked Walter Hess, Pete said, at one point. My dad, no, Pete said. Walter recognized what you already built. That's different. You put it in his words yourself. He said you held a tolerance that 3 other shops said was impossible. He didn't give you anything you didn't already demonstrate you could do. He just pointed the lights at it. I picked up my wine glass. You should have been a speechwriter. I know, Pete said. I've been wasting my talents on tomatoes. The signing was Monday, March 17th. Conrad Marsh's office occupied the 14th floor of a building on 5th Street downtown. With a view of the Ohio River on a clear day and enough wood paneling on the conference room walls to suggest that serious things happened regularly in this room, and had for some time. Sandra Fike arrived with me. She had read Conrad's final documents Friday evening, had 3 suggested modifications, minor clarifications of language, nothing structural, which Conrad had accepted Saturday morning by email with the efficiency of a man who'd anticipated them. The final documents were ready. Walter Hess was not at the signing in person. Dr. Slade had advised against the travel. He was present by video, a laptop positioned at the head of the conference table, Edmund beside it, Walter visible on the screen in what appeared to be the same chair by the same Indian Hill window. He looked a little more tired than Thursday. Not significantly, but enough that I noticed it and understood what it meant. Conrad walked through the documents with the thoroughness of a man who has spent 40 years making sure there are no surprises after the fact. Sandra followed at every step. I read everything, every page, every clause, every number. The 41% of Hess Industrial Group, 217 employees, the charitable foundation's 19%, non-operating permanent. Keep the people. I signed at 10:47 a.m. on a Monday morning in a conference room on 5th Street in Cincinnati. 17 years and 2 months after Walter Hess had first looked up Gary Precision Manufacturing, following a titanium housing tolerance that 3 other shops said was impossible. Conrad signed as Walter's representative. Sandra signed as witness. Edmund, on the screen, gave a small satisfied nod that I suspected was the most visible emotion he allowed himself in professional settings. Walter looked at me through the laptop. Anthony, he said. His voice was quieter than Thursday. Still clear. Congratulations. Thank you, Walter. I looked at the screen, at this 79-year-old man in a chair by a window in Indian Hill, who had, for reasons I was still partly in the process of understanding, decided that a 61-year-old manufacturer sleeping in a Blue Ash parking lot was the right person to carry something he'd spent his life building. I'll take care of them. I know you will, Walter said. And Walter, I paused. For what it's worth, you picked the right man. He looked at me through the screen for a moment, and this time, fully, clearly, without the pain blocking it, he smiled. I know that too, he said. Walter Hess died on Saturday, April 5th. Edmund called me at 8 in the morning. He was, according to Dr. Slade, comfortable. According to Edmund, he'd had a good Friday, alert, present, spent part of the afternoon in the chair by the window looking at the Indian Hill property he'd owned for 40 years. I sat with that for a while after I hung up. The April morning outside Pete's house. I was still staying with Pete, still finding my footing in the new geography of things, was mild in the way April mornings in Cincinnati can be mild when they decide to be generous. I made coffee, stood at Pete's kitchen window looking at the Hyde Park Street. Walter Hess, a man I knew for 3 weeks, a man who knew my work for 16 years. I walked into Hess Industrial Group's main office on Kenwood Road for the first time as the majority owner on Monday, March 18th, the morning after the signing. Edmund had arranged it, had communicated to the senior staff what was happening and why, had handled the announcement with the same precision he apparently applied to everything. The senior staff were assembled in the conference room. 14 people, operations directors, finance, HR, the plant manager who'd been with Walter since 1994. They looked at me the way people look at an unknown quantity, professionally, carefully, reserving judgment. I stood at the head of the table, looked around the room. "My name is Anthony Gary," I said. "I ran a machine parts company in Sharonville for 38 years. Last week I lost it. Walter Hess decided that made me the right person to run this one." I paused. "I'm going to need about 60 days to learn what I don't know about this operation. In those 60 days, nobody loses their job. Nothing changes without a conversation, and my door, wherever my door ends up being, is open. After 60 days, I'll tell you what I see and what I think needs to happen, and then we'll talk about it." I looked around the room again. Any questions? The plant manager, a man named Stewart, who I later learned had started on the floor at 22 and worked every position in the building, looked at me for a moment. Then he said, "Walter told us you held a micron tolerance on titanium that nobody else in Ohio could hold." "That's right." Stewart nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "That's okay then." I moved out of Pete's guest room on April 12th into a rental in Blue Ash. Nothing large, nothing impressive. The kind of place that's suitable for a man who is building rather than settling. Pete helped me move, which took 3 hours and was accomplished with considerably less ceremony than my exit from Anderson Township. Russell and Becca came to help. That was their idea. Russell called and offered, and I said yes without qualification. Because what's the point of carrying things you can put down? Becca was quiet most of the day. Careful. The specific careful of a person who understands they did something they can't undo, but is trying to be present in the aftermath. I didn't make it harder than it needed to be. She's Russell's wife, and Russell is my son, and the parking lot was 3 nights, and I have a company to run. At the end of the day, after the boxes were in and Pete had left and Russell and Becca were putting on their coats to go, Becca stopped in the doorway. Turned back. "Mr. Gary," she said. "Anthony, I'm sorry. About March. About what I should have." Becca. I looked at her. Russell's wife, 32 years old, with the face of someone working through something real. "It's okay. It's not." "It's going to be," I said. "That's the same thing." She nodded. Something in her face settled. Russell shook my hand at the door, held it a second longer than a handshake requires. Neither of us said anything. We didn't need to. On the evening of April 12th, in my new apartment in Blue Ash, 3 miles from the Kroger parking lot on Cooper Road, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the week's operational summary from Stewart at Hess Industrial, and the quiet of a life that was, improbably and specifically, and without any drama, beginning again. 217 people, I thought. Monday morning, they all have jobs. I picked up the operational summary. Started reading. "You built it once, Anthony. You know how to do this." Outside, the Blue Ash April evening was mild and ordinary and entirely indifferent to the particular arc of one man's recent weeks, which is exactly how the world should operate, and which I, for the first time in a long time, did not mind at all. The coffee was good. The summary was thorough. I had a lot of work to do. And for the first time in a very long time, I couldn't wait to start. If you liked this story, join our community by hitting that like button and subscribing for more real, raw, and family-centered stories.